People can have like unhealthy relationship expectations and all these things that you're going through. What matters is like, are they doing the work? And if they're not, then you're going to have a tough relationship. Avoidants are a hard attachment style to be with. Dismissive avoidance, fearful avoidance, both of them.
I wasn't always noticing what I was doing right and how I was showing up well in the relationship. I was more so thinking like what I'm doing wrong. And then if somebody mentioned something about that they wanted to change or need it, then I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. Like I'm incompetent in relationships. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today I'm here with our amazing co-host, Mike DeZio, and we are going to dive into something really interesting. So I want to be honest. This podcast started out as us having like 3 major questions from different places we were pulling from your YouTube comments or the Reddit thread or all these different places. We were like, okay, we're going to answer these key themes. And Mike came super prepared for this podcast and we talked, our first question was all about what is the idea of an ideal relationship for a dismissive avoidant? And I was expecting Mike to fire off like a few needs and things like that. And instead he dug so deep into all these expectations, having been a dismissive avoidant at the time. And by the way, if you didn't already know, or you're new to this podcast, this is all about us really sharing from, I was a fearful avoidant who became securely attached. Mike was a dismissive avoidant who became securely attached. And we share from like what our perspective was at the time of being insecurely attached and then the work required to move into a more secure space. And we often share about what different anxious attachment styles can pay attention to or be, attuned to and also mindful of so that they're also taking care of the relationship to themselves and their own needs. So anyways, back to the original story here. Mike came in and was like dug so deep into the expectations of what it was like to be in the dismissive avoidance mind that we were like, hey, let's unpack these. So we actually spent almost the whole episode today talking about the expectations of a dismissive avoidant, the ones that tended to be, really more unhealthy than healthy, like these big core ideas, like, okay, don't be too needy or ask too much of me in the relationship. And then we spent a lot of time in the second half of this episode unpacking basically the truth. Like, where is not being needy actually something that can be, a healthy middle ground we can find in terms of somebody being able to meet some of their own needs sometimes in a way that a securely attached person would be, but also how can the dismissive avoidant question that expectation and move more to a center space? So we will spend this entire episode going into those key, deep, often hidden and not discussed expectations dismissive avoidants secretly have of their partners and relationships, and then unpacking what is healthy, what is unhealthy, and what can you do if you're on the other side of it. So stay tuned. I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode, and we are going to dive right in. So let's dive into the first part, and I would love for you to kick it off, Mike. If you want to share about when you were a dismissive avoidant, what the ideal relationship was for you. Like, what did you think you were looking for? What were your needs? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I kind of did some research here and just went back to sort of thinking about what ideally the person I want to be with. As I was writing these, I was like, oh, some of these are going to sound really triggering. Like, it'll just sound like really like shallow and like terrible, but I'm just being 1,000% honest. Like, that's all I want to be is like open here. And these are some of the things that I know that I would have wanted. I know a lot of them are coming just from like the fear-based aspect of it and just to feel comfortable and like, not feel like the person's going to leave me or abandon me. So I just want to give that little caveat that some of these things might be a little triggering, but it is the way that it is. And obviously the more work you do, the more a lot of these things are not going to be what you want. And you're going to more look for a relationship based on more love and mutual respect than just sort of protecting your wounds and protecting your heart. So DAs, definitely in a relationship, want someone who's not needy. We say needy like that's a terrible thing, and it's not. But DAs think that you're supposed to meet your own needs, and I'm supposed to meet my own needs. Like, we're like independent people, and please don't come with me with all your neediness. So for DA, they can be really turned off by somebody who's too quote unquote needy. Someone who can solve their own problems, as I said, like. A lot of times DAs don't want a partner who has all these issues and problems and wants you to sort of help them solve it. it's kind of like, hey, that's a bit of a you problem. Like you figure that out yourself. And then when I have problems, it was my belief that I'm the one who's able to solve it, and really nobody else is going to be able to help me anyway. So there's really no point in asking for help or for someone to help me. So somebody, again, who's independent in that way. Someone who's sort of, again, we've talked about this in the past about DAs being sort of financially stingy. So they're worried about resources because, you know, when they were young, they were worried they weren't going to survive and they have to do it all on their own again. So again, they want someone who sort of maybe has their own job, their own life, where the relationship is not like the most important thing. Hobbies, pursuits, things outside of the relationship. So not somebody who wants to hang out all day, every day. Somebody who does have their own life and likes to do things by themselves as well. That seemed to be sort of something that was really comfortable and desirable. Again, someone who has their own money. DAs can be really kind of shook if they think that they have money that they've probably saved for a long, long time, and somebody's coming into the relationship with a whole bunch of debt or like no money in the bank. So then they get really like their back up thinking, oh, like my, you know, nest egg that has to last me the rest of my life is going to slowly be eroded by this person. And that could be super fearful for a DA. So I guess financially stable,
yeah,
independent, stable, things like that. Someone who doesn't want to talk about feelings a lot, or they can talk about feelings, but just don't dig into what our feelings are. We don't want to be sort of put on the spot and like have these long conversations about our feelings and how we feel about the relationship and feel about a lot of things. So yeah, again, just being honest, that's sort of how it was. Someone who can just enjoy the relationship without having to make future plans for the relationship. DAs are not usually interested in like, hey, let's get excited for our future together and plans and name our firstborn child together. Like they're not really interested in talking about that kind of stuff. They just want to sort of enjoy the moment. Don't rock the boat. Things are good now. They feel good. We have a nice time together. That's good. Let's just continue that. Somebody who's not really interested, like blending friends and families. Like if that's really important to someone, then we're like, no, like we kind of don't want to do that. And I know DAs can almost be a little harsh. We're like, no, I'm not going to that family function of yours, or I don't want to go out with your friends. Like they could be really like steadfast in their sort of
boundaries.
rejection.
Yeah, like almost too extreme boundaries, like an unwillingness to compromise at times.
Yeah. I'll just flip a question to you, just because my list is a little bit longer. I don't want to take up all the talk time, but have you ever dated somebody where they didn't want to meet your friends and didn't want to meet your families? And was that like such an offensive thing where like why would you not want to meet why would you not want to meet my friends? Like, would you get super offended, or would you sort of know, hey, that's just sort of how this person operates? You know, we can deal with that.
I'll be really honest. I've actually never dated somebody like that. But it's very true that can be a dismissive avoidant thing. Most people listening, obviously, you know this, like my husband, when we first met, was dismissive avoidant, but he was always really good about stuff like that. Like he was always, but the main difference, and I want to say, because like as you're telling your list, and I want you to finish the list, I feel like I was listening to it and I was like, you're really being so honest and so clear. And you're not really, I thought you were going to come at it from like, oh, we need appreciation or acknowledgement in relationships, or we need independence or autonomy. So I thought you were going to talk about needs. And you're like, these are the things in a relationship that we don't want. And as I'm listening to it, they're great shares because like they're the inside scoop in such a good way. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, okay, like there's this glaring part of it. Like you can hear how it's going to be hard to be in that relationship dynamic. And so I'm glad you asked me that question, because for anybody listening, you know, I have a soft spot for avoidance. My husband was one. You're one of my closest friends. You were one. I have seen so many avoidants in my practice and in personal development school, like change and heal. But like what matters is people can have like unhealthy relationship expectations and all these things that you're going through. What matters is like, are they doing the work? And if they're not, then you're going to have a tough relationship. Avoidants are a hard attachment style to be with. Dismissive avoidance, fearful avoidance, both of them. But for anybody listening to this, the job is not to mold yourself into becoming all these things just do what Mike says. Okay, never ask to meet your family or their family. Like, don't change yourself to be these things. So if you're listening, actually recognize, hey, these are probably some of their expectations. Try to have dialogues about them. Ask them where they're willing to make compromises. And then if they do, beautiful, you're growing together. If they don't, then that's going to be the person that you're with. And that's where it's a call for boundaries yourself and to maybe take a step back in the relationship dynamic. So I just wanted to highlight that because you're going through the list and I'm like, these are tough things when you're just seeing it not through the lens of needs, but through the lens of basically the subconscious expectations that you're talking about that they have that they may not even be aware of.
100%. And great thing to bring that up. And yeah, no, if there's somebody who has these sort of strict boundaries and they refuse to even budge on any of them, or if you're telling them, hey, but this is really important to me, and they're just no, absolute no, I don't care, then that's that's an issue. But if you see it's somebody who struggles in that area and it's probably due to just uncomfortability, there's ways to sort of lead people into doing some of these things, meeting one of your best friends, let's say at a lunch, instead of bringing them to a party where they're going to be exposed to a whole table full of strangers. So yeah, definitely glad you brought that up. This is absolutely not to be you should bend and contort yourself just to keep the person happy and feeling safe. That's really their job. That's mainly the lion's share of their job, to work on themselves and try to become more safe, feel more safe and in various ways. Yeah. But you want me to keep going on the list?
Yeah, let's hear it. These are great.
When I was going, you're this is not what I expected at all.
I was oh, these are the expectations. It's such a great thing though, because it's highlighting, honestly, even for if somebody's a dismissive avoidant listening, I think it's helpful for them to even just hear too, how unrealistic or imbalanced some of these expectations are. I will never be your family. These kinds of dynamics are worth pushing on, self-evaluating about, because it just makes it for a lot of difficulty in a relationship. So anyways, they're great if you want to continue.
And for dismissive avoidants who some of these resonate with, these are all changeable. And I know some of these areas are so scary, but they are, if you do the work, you can slowly, through a lot of different ways, get better at these types of things. Yeah. So back to the list, no drama. We said that we've talked about this before. Dismissive avoidance can be in low level fight or flight. So kind of a low level anxiety all the time. So they don't, anything that's drama or adding more to their nervous system dysregulation is too much. So they get really scared and want to push away if there's a lot of sort of quote unquote drama. Someone who's very non-judgmental and accepting of flaws. So that's sort of a nice thing. When you can sense somebody seems very judgmental and you're kind of no, you don't feel great around them. But there's people like you, Tice, I can say when we met, I felt right away that you're just one of those people that's not sort of judging negatively and looking for weirdness. You just seem very accepting. So that feels really good to us because we're not unconditionally accepting to ourselves, and maybe our parents weren't. So when somebody's doing that to us, we feel wow, this feels amazing. And I have a better chance of sort of opening up a bit with somebody who I don't think is going to judge me negatively. So, and feel free to dive in or jump in if there's anything you want to comment. Again, someone who accepts us the way that we are without trying to change us. Yeah. Again, we don't want you to want to change us, but there are things that we need to work on and change a little bit.
Okay, there's so many good things you're saying. I have to interrupt. I was looking a week for the list, but they're so good. We may have to spend a little extra time just on this topic on this episode because it's so good. So let's unpack some of this just for a second for people listening. So where is the line for you? Because obviously we've done this work firsthand and all these different things, but where's the line? Somebody comes in and they're they're super accepting, but where's the line between somebody who's being accepting versus somebody who's also willing to advocate for their needs?
That's such the tough part, right? Because everyone 100% should advocate for their needs and speak up. But then there's the avoidant side who can sometimes take somebody speaking up for their needs as them criticizing them or telling them that, they're not good enough or there's something wrong with them. So everyone should be advocating for their needs, and DAs just have to get a little better at not thinking that everything is a criticism or
An attack.
something against them. Take it, yeah, an attack or taking it personal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When I met when Graham and I kind of went through like our power struggle stage of our relationship, because everyone has one, and it was kind of this unique time where I realized like, okay, I'm in this relationship. We've been dating for a year and a half at the time. This is like 8.5 years ago almost or something crazy. But I remember thinking like I don't communicate my needs enough. And I started to feel like, oh, I'm noticing this imbalance in the relationship where I'm like giving more than I'm receiving. And I realized because I was in the work, I was like, oh, that's a me problem. Like that's me not advocating. Now, I may advocate and then he doesn't do anything about it. And then that may not just be a me problem, but I have to actually advocate. And so I remember like making this commitment to myself that for like 6 months, I was going to do everything I could to just like talk about my needs openly in real time and to do it positively. And I think what really worked for me, for anybody who was listening, because he was pretty dismissive avoidant, he was doing the work too. So we were both like on this path to becoming secure already. But at the time, what I did is my attitude was really kind about it. Like I really made sure I managed. I wasn't like, hey, you're not doing this, I need this. I was like, hey, I appreciate you. And I know that like you have all this stuff on your plate, or I know that, I would kind of validate his experience and his emotions and start off with something positive. And then I would positively frame the need. And then I would also say like, hey, and I realized I wasn't communicating this, so that's on me. So I was like accountable. I wasn't blaming. And I was like, I think my emotional demeanor was still accepting, if that makes sense. Like I was still like, my attitude was still accepting. I wasn't like, you're bad. I was like, hey, here's a need that I have. And like, I haven't shared that before. And I realized I should be doing that. And I just was kind about my communication. I would see it through. And I saw this not just with Graham, I saw this with so many dismissive avoidant clients I had. I feel like if you just are willing to do this work, I saw this with so many couples. Dismissive avoidants, like sometimes are some of the best at showing up for the challenge if they're communicated to kindly and with like a positive attitude. And so anyways, I raised that because it was like, then people are like, oh, don't advocate for your needs, don't have any needs, or just always be accepting. But you can have an accepting attitude and an accepting demeanor and still be like, hey, I have a need and I haven't shared this with you. And that's on me to start sharing and communicating. Can we work on this together? And if you go about it that way, I feel like it's actually hard to not build some kind of momentum through that. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. No, it's so true. Like it's the delivery and sort of the demeanor and the vibe that you're bringing the need or the request is like almost everything. So, DAs can really shut down quick if they're thinking it's just you attacking them. But like you said, it's if you frame it in a way that like, hey, just to let you know, like when you do the dishes and after I've made the dinner, that's like so helpful to me and actually makes me feel like I'm really cared for. Probably the person had no clue about that. Like they're just like just did the dishes one time without thinking about it. So when they know that they're doing something right, because we always think like we're doing something wrong in relationships. We think like we don't know what the hell we're doing. So when somebody actually like says like, hey, like you're actually showing up really well by doing that, like you're doing really well in that area, we kind of like feel pretty proud and like, hey, like I'm not a total like, total numpty or total idiot in the relationship. Like we're not good at noticing what we're doing right. Or I'll just speak for myself, but I wasn't always noticing what I was doing right and how I was showing up well in the relationship. I was more so thinking like what I'm doing wrong. And then if somebody mentioned something about that they wanted to change or need it, then I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. Like I'm incompetent in relationships. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So like you said, if you just frame it as like not getting angry and not attacking the person's character, why are you such a slob? Why do you always leave everything? You're so filthy. Like if you don't frame it in that way, it's just received so much better. And then we do want to show up well. Like we want to be a good boyfriend. We don't want you like getting mad at us all the time. So there's that. And then the other thing is don't give up on your needs. So you might not have delivered your need or set a boundary and it didn't have the best success the first time. Do it again. Like especially as an FA, you're probably not used to setting boundaries eloquently or properly because it wasn't modeled to you well. So just because it doesn't go well the first time, like I've heard of some people trying to, say a boundary or discuss a need. First of all, it's very vulnerable. And for them to do it is very brave. But if it doesn't go exactly the way they want, they're like, I'm never doing that again. He doesn't want to do this. But it's not true. Like you just have to sometimes go about it. Okay, I need to maybe try this in a different way. Like don't ever stop giving up for your boundaries and needs.
Yeah, and I want to add to that too. These are like so many important topics that you're bringing up. Is like that's exactly the case. Like I can't stress how important what Mike just said is. And I think people hear that and they first think like, oh, so I'm just going to keep saying my need forever, even though the person's not meeting it and I'm just settling. That's not what it means. It means that true embodied communication is you having the ability to truly see your needs through. And that means, when I was fearful avoidant, I was like, I said the need once. If they didn't meet it immediately and perfectly, they don't care at all. And I'm never speaking up again. And like, you just sabotage yourself that way. And what I learned over time is like, no, you see your needs through because everybody has this different experience of their own conditioning. Everybody has years of like what their conditioned model. It's not even conscious, it's subconscious. They have like all of the model of what a relationship should look like. So if you have a DA and they think, well, you just meet your own needs and I meet my own needs because that was all of their modeling, then when all of a sudden somebody's trying to get them to do something differently, it just because somebody's not perfect doesn't mean they don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is you can set. So you can set a deadline. You can be like, I'm going to try really hard at this. I'm going to communicate my needs and be really thorough and really conscientious about how I communicate for 3 months or 2 weeks or however long you want to do it. And you're going to see by the end of that, like, let's say 3-month cycle, the deadline should always be relative to how long you're in the relationship for. So if you've been dating somebody for 6 years, you might do 6 months. If you've been dating somebody for 2 weeks, you might try for 1 afternoon, right? It should depend on like that relativity, but you pick a deadline, you pour into it, you communicate, you practice, you'll know very loud and clear if the person did the work with you by the end or not. You'll see the needle move or the relationship dynamic change, or you'll see like, wow, nothing changed at all. And then you know, okay, I'm probably not in the right relationship. But if you just think by communicating one time that now somebody's going to be perfect at it, you also shoot yourself in the foot. So we need that like balance between seeing our needs through, embodying communication, not giving up on our needs, exactly like you said, which is so underrated in terms of how important it is, but also being able to like have a deadline and vet and see, is this person really willing to make those compromises with us?
1000%. That's all great stuff.
I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. Let's go back to the list.
Back to the list. Okay. So this one's funny. Even as I wrote it, it's hilarious. We actually really want and enjoy someone who's very giving. So, it just, we weren't a lot of times in childhood given a lot of like emotional soothing and affection and nice words and maybe like gift giving, stuff like that. Like, when somebody is giving, we're like, wow, this is freaking amazing. Like, we're just not so used to it. So yeah, someone giving, like, I know when I dated people who were giving in the past, I was like, this is amazing. Like, I love this feeling, and this person, wow, they're just such a giver by nature. But then I found out later on, and you can comment on this, I think I dated a lot of FAs, so they were just like giving. And I'm thinking, wow, this person really loves to give. Like, they love it. This makes them so happy. But then I found out later on that like, they were like,
gave until resentment.
Right, when are you going to give back to me? So just realize if somebody's like giving, like that's beautiful and great. And some people do love to give by nature, but like, show them some love by giving back, and like, or at least show them a lot of appreciation verbally, and just say, hey, like, wow, I really recognize you've been really, I don't know, showing up amazing in this area. So yeah, someone giving was always something when I was
and encourage them to like communicate their needs too, because that's the like, so having been FA, I totally relate to being on the other side of that, like being so giving and naturally, because I actually, and like, even once it became secure, even if I look back now when I was FA, I actually like to contribute. Like, I actually got something out of giving. I like that feeling a lot. But where it becomes difficult is when you don't take up space as well in the relationship. So when you're just giving, but you're not asking for anything ever, even when you truly need something or need support, and you never like let anyone know that you even like are your own human who has needs, you're also kind of like building your own prison a little bit because you're giving, giving, giving. So there's also a little bit, of course, as the DA, you want to make sure that you're like being mindful and that's your work and to compromise around giving and everything that you're saying. And on the receiving end from the FA side or sometimes AP side too can do this. If you're feeling resentful, that's like a pulse check. That's like a, hey, this is feedback for me. Am I not taking up space? And don't be afraid to say, okay, wait a second. I actually have to go take up some space. It's not like be less giving and subtract. It's like if you're giving and then this is all that you're asking, it's like an addition. It's like, don't be afraid to take up space more, ask for your needs, make time for those things, make requests, not give less and then you feel better. It's like an addition rather than a subtraction, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I never actually thought about it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. Would you say in early dating when you were hardcore FA that if you weren't giving, that the person wasn't going to like you? So in essence, like you had to give because you thought this is what's going to make the person love me.
It definitely wasn't like a conscious thing. It definitely wasn't like I thought that like consciously, but I definitely had a big pattern of thinking I had to earn my worth and everything. So I would definitely like over deliver on everything in life, like relationships, friendships, like try to be like the best friend. I remember having this big pressure of like thinking that every time I was dating somebody, every date had to be like the best date. Like it had to always get better and improve. And there's this like background pressure of like everything has to be 10 out of 10 all the time in every aspect of the relationship. And so I think that's where it came from, was this like earning of the worth and connection. And it was obviously sneaky because I also liked giving and I liked the impact that would have. But then I would give into oblivion. And I definitely had a lot of work to do at different points in my life of like, not just give until you literally run out of energy and resources and all those things, which I would naturally do. And that's where the resentment would then kick in.
Oh man, I gotta blame that all on Disney. Like you expect every date to be like Romeo and Juliet or like, I don't know. I don't even know the name of Disney movies right now, but FAs I know can sometimes, is it FAs and APs? That sort of can sometimes fall for that movie. Disney.
Totally. Yeah.
I think that's the way relationships should be. And if they're not, that means we're not in love. We shouldn't be together.
Wait, what did you think when you were a little kid? I thought everybody assumed that from Disney movies. You were like, oh, that's BS early on. You knew?
Nah, maybe not when I was young, but I think at some point I'm like, this is just setting us up for disaster, especially for men. Like a lot of times, it's the woman who the man is like bending over backwards and doing all this crazy stuff to win the woman's love. And I was just like, oh man, if women are like eating this up, we're doomed. We have no hope.
That's so funny. I wonder how many DAs like have thought or felt that. I've never thought about that before, but that's hilarious.
While we're watching the movie, they're like, come on, who's gonna do all this?
Or like you're just sitting in the movie theater like stressed, like, oh, now she expects this from me.
After the movie, if there's a puddle on the ground, I got to take my jacket off, throw it in the puddle so she can walk over. That one always stuck in my head when I saw that back in the day, they would throw like a jacket on the ground so the woman can walk over the puddle. But you're ruining a perfectly good jacket. Very good times. Okay, a few more. So again, this is terrible, but not too assertive. We sort of like feel more comfortable if the person's a little more subservient, like a little more, what can I do for you type attitude mentality, which is terrible. But it is what it is. We really want to feel like we're still autonomous and not controlled at all. So if we feel that someone is okay to give us autonomy, to give us, days off, we don't have to sort of pour everything into the relationship. Like we can still maintain our own autonomy and our own hobbies and friendship group and all that. DAs show up a lot better when they think they're not going to be controlled. As soon as we feel like there's some controlling type behavior, or we feel or sense or perceive that somebody's trying to control us, we can get really like, no, like hell no, like this isn't happening. Yeah. So doesn't criticize. And we touched on this before, but specific instructions, like if you need something. This might sound totally ridiculous, but like it was so helpful if somebody would be like, listen, I
Literal
need
communication.
flowers once in a while. Like I like flowers. I notice here you never bought me flowers, and that's fine. But I'm just letting you know it means so much to me that if you're to like bring home flowers once in a while, and it's like cool, okay, great. Like then you know sort of like what this person likes, and I don't have to guess, and I don't have to like you know dig into feelings and all that. So like when somebody's telling me specific directions on what they like or what they appreciate, it's so helpful. And like you touched on before, DAs can actually show up pretty well when they're not being criticized, but they feel like somebody's just giving them a little bit of helpful direction. We can actually show up pretty well and want to again make the person happy.
Yeah, and then like positively reinforcing it, like actually going through and saying thank you. Like I noticed you did this thing, and
Yeah.
sometimes it can take like people be like, oh, I know people listening right now are like that takes the romance out of things they should know. And there's a part
Yeah.
like somebody can make like these efforts, but giving somebody some bandwidth or direction can also be really useful. I want you to finish your list, and then what we're actually going to do, I'm going to change it up for a second here. What we're going to do in the second part of this episode after we take a break is we're going to go into all of these expectations, and we're going to talk about what healthier reframes would be. Like for people who are listening, I just really want to make sure people aren't like, I have to do all these things in the relationship now. But actually, where is this something that's like, okay, don't criticize. Okay, well, do I never say anything? Well, how you communicate will matter. So what that looks like. So I want to go through some of these really amazing like shares that you're going through and actually reframe them into what could be a healthier expectation and what that even looks like. So anyways, finish your list, but then we'll go back through for anybody listening for like, what's the healthier piece of this?
Okay, so there's 4 more. This won't be a 2-hour podcast, don't worry. So not a lot of demand or over demand for physical affection. So if it's just too much, like maybe some people who are on the anxious side could cuddle and hold and sleep together beside somebody and just they want to constantly be like touching and be attached to each other. Whereas DAs can, I think there's a little more of a ceiling for that where you're like, okay, like I need my space now. Like I'm feeling a little invaded. Like I need to like recalibrate and sort of get back to myself. So I remember noticing a few times that, it felt very nice just hugging someone and getting some physical touch. Physical touch is one of my love languages, but there does get to a certain point where it's almost like you're almost
Your cap.
Your cap, right? So if the AP's cap is up here and the DA's cap's here, is the FA is literally in the middle where physical affection, there's a certain point where they're like, hey, no more, but they probably have a little more give than like a DA would. What would be your thought?
Generally, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So there's that. Someone who accepts that we need a lot of time alone. So someone who's not going to judge or get angry or try to encroach on that. Slow pace. Closeness to happen slowly. So not to like, again, plan for the future the first few months or try to like really like combine each other's lives like super quick. So we need like a very slow build in that regard. And then lastly, I was just adding my last point, the closeness. For DA's, closeness equaled pain when they were younger. So they sort of, if it comes too fast, it can sort of trigger like old wounds. So the past closeness equaled like stress, sometimes hurt, rejection.
Neglect of needs, like not even really having the needs met and all these expectations on at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly. So just know that if you're with someone DA, it's probably in your best interest to just, relax, settle into things. I know in a new relationship, we all get excited and think about, wow, this could be the one and want to really like maybe fast forward things. But
we're going to talk about healthy pacing. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break. There's so many things that I want to cover from here. Like we may even spend the whole rest of this episode just talking about this and doing like an extended like series on this, because you brought up so many important points. And I want for everybody listening to hear a couple things in summary. Number one, I know we keep saying this, not to beat a dead horse. It doesn't mean go behave this way in all of your relationships, right? But it's really helpful. And the big like reason we're doing this podcast from my perspective is that when we don't understand somebody else and their patterns and their conditioning, we can't properly take them into consideration and then build possible momentum in the relationship. It's like we're dealing with somebody, you're kind of like walking around in a dark room, you don't know what's going on. Oh, go turn on the lights. Now you can see, now you can decide what happens next. And once we can sort of turn on the lights in our understanding or awareness about other attachment styles, we can start to navigate the relationships differently. That also includes, for people listening, the relationship to yourself. And so what I want to do is after this break here, you brought up way too many important points to change gears on anything else. We'll do an FA version of this later on. But I would love for us to go back through and talk about some of those major things and talk about what a healthy expectation is. So if it was don't criticize, okay, hey, you should still state your needs, but do it in a healthy way. If it was don't move too fast, well, what's a pace where there's actual compromise and a middle ground that can still work for a DA, but also encourages that dismissive avoidant to be doing the work with you so you can see if you can grow in this relationship together. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add before the quick break, but you brought up so many great points. So we're going to dive into them even more deeply after this.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So the summer is coming to a close, and now it's time to welcome in probably our much busier season. And if you're anything like me, the last place you probably want to be spending time is figuring out what to eat for dinner and standing in long grocery store lines. So you can make life easier with HelloFresh, which is America's #1 meal kit. With fresh ingredients and simple recipe cards delivered straight to your door, HelloFresh takes care of all of your meal planning, shopping, and meal prep. And I really can't express how much time HelloFresh has actually saved me each and every week. What I love most is the variety. So whether you're looking for fit and wholesome or quick and easy, vegetarian, or even family-friendly options, their ever-changing recipes keep food exciting when it comes to dinner and never leave me feeling like I'm making the same meals and just eating the same food over and over again. So if you're ready to save time and make cooking much more enjoyable for you and your loved ones, you can go for free breakfast for life at hellofresh.com/free Thais. That's THAIS. And you'll get one free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to hellofresh.com/free Thais, THAIS. Welcome back to this discussion for today. So Mike, in the first part of this episode, if you're just jumping in here now, went into so much amazing detail about the dismissive avoidance idea of a perfect relationship. And we're talking a lot about like when someone was a dismissive avoidant and, what those patterns were of behavior. But really what Mike did such a good job of highlighting were these subconscious expectations that dismissive avoidants have, like what they're basically secretly hoping a relationship will look like based on all of their own conditioning, including conditioned fears that they're trying to avoid feeling or conditioned wounds that they're trying to sidestep around. And I thought this brought up such an important topic of conversation, which is these expectations a dismissive avoidant has. Where is like the healthy medium? Like where is that healthy middle ground between, okay, you hear this and maybe you're an anxious attachment style listening to this or a fearful avoidant. It's not your job to then become all of these things. It's your job to understand this about somebody else and work to find a middle ground between your expectations and theirs through openness, through honesty, and through transparency and communication. So what I'd love for us to do is just, if you want to highlight like maybe the top like 5 or 7, dynamics in there, these like big ideas. And then let's unpack together, where this becomes unhealthy as an expectation, but where it becomes healthy as a need or a compromised expectation that can take somebody else into consideration too.
Yeah, 100%. So first what I want to talk about is like the DA wants someone who's not needy. I guess I just wanted to come at this from more of an anxious perspective and just, I know you said, Thais, sometimes where you have to look at the need. And if you're putting the need on the other person 100%, that right away is unhealthy. And that's going to put a lot of expectation and pressure on the other person. So in areas where you see that you're needing something or your needs are not being met, I think you need to look at it first and be like, okay, how good am I at meeting this need myself? Am I wanting this person to meet this need 100%? Or is this something that I would just like like to have once in a while, but if I was alone, I could easily meet this need myself, but it's important in a relationship. So I just want to point out that fact that I think you have to look. And what was sort of the magic number there, the 50%? If you can meet
Yeah, like I think we're each responsible 100% for our 50% of the relationship. So will you share, like, let's do it for anybody who doesn't like know PDS lingo as much or they're newer to this topic. Let's give like a specific example. So let's say, so to your point, we often talk about how we will outsource our needs. So if you're anxiously attached, for example, or fearful avoidant, and you're not good at being present with yourself and making yourself feel seen, okay, well, then I want everybody else to see me because then it sort of meets this need. And we'll generally project onto other people the places or the needs that we feel in the most learned helplessness with in the relationship to ourselves.
Sure.
To DA, that presents as neediness. And that's actually pretty fair because there is this, hey, you're almost exclusively outsourcing this need. And I think DAs pick up on that, but they also expect, like, don't give me any of that. So,
that is a problem, yeah.
so where is that, like, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this as we dive into it. Where do you think, as an example, that healthy medium would be? Like you have an anxious attachment style there, like, you should always meet my needs to feel seen and to hear me. Dismissive avoidance, like, that's yours. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just the easy one that popped in my head was need for time together. So a highly anxious person does not usually want to spend time by themselves. That's actually very uncomfortable, and they will do anything that they can to sort of connect, whether it be with friends, with coworkers, with romantic partner. So if you're relying on your partner to be with you because you can't be with yourself, for sure, again, the DA is going to be like, whoa, like, just because you can't be by yourself and you want to be with me like all day, every day, like, that's kind of not fair because I enjoy being by myself. I actually need and want my alone time. And it's really unfair if you're going to try to encroach on that solely for the fact that you can't be alone even for a few hours. So again, those are like the extreme examples, but like a healthy medium would be if you are noticing you're not getting enough time. Let's say you like to see a romantic partner 3 times a week, and that's sort of comfortable for you, and you think that would really make you feel connected and bonded. But the DA is only willing to do once a week. So there we go. This is a chance for sort of negotiation and like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, generally in relationships and to feel connected to someone, I like to see someone, about 3 times a week. It seems like we're only hanging out 1 time a week. How do you think about we hang out once a week and then maybe we try twice, like maybe we can go to the movies or do something outside of the house. So you're sort of like proposing like a middle ground. You're not saying like, I need 3 days and this is the only way it'll be and you have to do this. You're letting them know what's really important to them, how you want to feel, you'll feel more connected. Can we settle on 2 and see how it goes? Is that something you're willing to try? And I think that big part is like, let's try this. This is not like, okay, if you agree to this, like, you have to see me twice a week from now to the rest of your life. It's sort of coming at it at more of like what's the word there?
Negotiation, a test, a trial.
Exactly. And asking for their feedback. How does that feel to you? Are you willing to try this? Like, language of like cooperation.
Inclusion. Okay, so this is amazing. So here's a few things. And I want to highlight the things that Mike said in his example. Number 1 for this to work, okay, and this is part of becoming securely attached for anybody listening. Number 1 for this to work, one of the key themes that happened in Mike's example was transparency. Both people have to be willing to like have the conversation about what their expectation is and what they're used to. And I always give this analogy, and I'll give it again. Your attachment style is your subconscious set of rules for love and connection. So if you imagine like Mike and I are friends and we're going to go hang out and we're going to play a board game and you have the rules for Scrabble and I have the rules for Monopoly, no matter how much we want to go have fun and catch up and do all these things, like, it's going to suck because we have different rules and there's going to be chaos and we're going to be really confused about why you're not playing the board game I'm playing, especially if we don't realize that we have different sets of rules. And, your attachment style is that. It's your subconscious set of rules for what you expect love to look like. Now, if Mike and I can sit down and say, hey, these are my rules. These were my expectations for the game. What are yours? Oh, here's yours. And you can share yours. And we can be transparent enough to be, to be able to put it all out on the table. And we can be self-aware enough with a little bit of introspection to realize what we're needing and looking for. Well, now all of a sudden, we can actually have really productive conversations and we can make compromises. And that's what securely attached people do. And so, a huge part of this and why your example is so great is like those negotiations and making those healthy compromises to find those parts of that middle ground. That is very achievable for everybody if they can be transparent and honest, not people please and only say part of their expectation or need because they don't want to upset the other person. Like you have to say what your real expectation is 3 times a week, okay, 1 day a week. And then you're able to meet in the middle. And I love the second thing you said. And I just want to like systemize this for people. You can almost think of like that next step as being once you've had that dialogue, add in there that inclusive language. Because if you say like, this is the way it is, and we're locked in and, hey, things change, people change, situations change, our work changes. Maybe we're really busy one time, or maybe you have, some other external responsibilities with your family. So it's not like a stamp of, foreverness. It's, wait, let's have the conversation. Let's talk about it. And let's make that the norm in our relationship, that we can talk about these things, that we can check in, that it's open-ended, and yet it's intentional. And so I love that example. And that's, a really, really great dynamic of how we go from like this idea of neediness. Okay, we're never going to meet the needs, or the AP or FA might be like, no, we're going to meet all of each other's needs, to both being transparent, putting it all on the table, finding that middle ground. And now we start to really get into these things as being healthy expectations, healthy communication of needs, and solvable problems.
Solvable problems, exactly. And I love the board game analogy. It's so kind of basic, but it covers just exactly sort of the issues and the problems. And when you know somebody else's rules, you can see, oh, okay, like you're not personalizing so many things either. A lot of times we take things personal with someone's behavior, but it's like, oh, that has nothing to do with me at all. Like that's just the way they sort of operate, right? So yeah, I love the board game analogy, and we should definitely learn everybody else's board game. But I want to be Scrabble. Scrabble is my favorite game. I don't know if you put
Oh, I would way rather be Monopoly. Monopoly is way more fun.
Yeah, nice. Okay, you want to get in the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Someone who doesn't want to talk about feelings. So how do you, if you want to start, or I could start, like how do you sort of get someone to open up, or what's your best chance of getting someone to open up about their feelings?
Yeah, it's such a great example. So let's go, we'll do like a little system here. So we'll do extremes of both sides. Okay, so we'll call it like the extreme of the dismissive avoidance, the extreme on the more anxious side that fearful avoidance can often share into. So somebody who never talks about feelings, we don't have to talk about feelings in the relationship. I don't want to talk about feelings in relationships, could be like a very DA perspective. Anxious or FA even could be like, I want to almost always talk about feelings in relationships. Like that should be, something we talk about all the time. That should be the major part of a relationship. Now, then we have the reality, right? Which is the middle ground space. And when we look at relationships have different pillars. So relationships have an emotional connection pillar, AKA talking about feelings, a physical connection pillar, which can be like physical touch, physical proximity, like do you live together or not? How much time do you spend with each other? Then you have a sexual pillar, which is obviously about sex and intimacy. And then you have a romantic connection pillar. So we have physical, mental, emotional, romantic. And when we look at that pillar of relationships, that's like, that romantic expression about feelings, things like that. So when we look at actually connecting, the idea that we're always going to talk about feelings can actually be not inclusive of the other pillars of relationship. And what you'll generally see is dismissive avoidance. They tend to do well with like the mental pillar of relationships. They want to intellectually connect, and then maybe connect a little bit emotionally, and then connect sexually. And so those tend to be like the places they feel more comfortable, right? More so like mental and sexual. And then you may see, an anxious attachment style be more like emotional and romantic, right? So you'll see that we all have these different pillars that we trend towards naturally based on our attachment style. Doesn't mean that you don't express or get interested in the other pillars. They're just maybe like more of a weight that we put on those specific areas. So again, if we're looking at a system of like what goes from, hey, we should never talk about feelings. Okay, where's the healthy ground for that? What's a healthier expectation? It should be that you can talk about and share what you're most comfortable in a relationship, like the pillars that are most important to you. Maybe sharing with somebody, for example, if they're talking about feelings all the time, saying, hey, like I'm happy to talk about these discussions, but I also find that I connect with people through sharing about our opinions and ideas and things we're learning. And that's like that intellectual pillar for me, or mental pillar. And, I also want us to be able to talk and ask about those things. And so being able to actually take up space in your needs for other topics, and by the same token, have the more anxious leaning side of the relationship dynamic be able to say, hey, often I notice that we drift back into connecting just in, you can think of like a very typical situation where maybe there's an anxious attachment style and a dismissive avoidant, and you're dating, but you're not exclusive. And you're kind of like, wait, like we're spending a lot of time together and the person's initiating a lot of discussion and time, but we're kind of like sleeping together and having some conversations, but we're not really like getting to know each other emotionally or talking about the romantic pillar of the relationship. Well, if you're going to vet if this is going to be a relationship that you're trying to progress, then you have to talk about those things, and you have to say, hey, I noticed we spent a lot of time here. I also want us to be able to share more about like feelings and the romantic side of things. And so that may require, you talking a little bit more about like how your week was and what worked out for you, what felt good, what didn't feel good for you, and deepening more of that like emotional expression side of the relationship. So I think the first point is that on either extreme, it can be problematic because we exclude the other pillars. The second point is that we have to have a conversation about our preferred forms of connection to see where we can find that middle ground. And when we're first trying to get somebody to talk about things that are around their feelings that they may feel uncomfortable about, you don't have to start with like really dramatic language. I find that dismissive avoidants, they respond way better by having higher level language. So if you say things like, hey, you said that thing about your boss yesterday, that might have been uncomfortable for you. What did you do? And instead of saying, hey, your boss must have really hurt you, were you really afraid that you would lose your job? Like, instead of getting into dramatic expression, using words like uncomfortable, difficult, challenging, did you feel like that was challenging? Instead of, did you feel really sad about that? Dismissive avoidants are not going to respond to like the really sad. That's going to feel a little overwhelming at first and confronting. So when we want to find that middle ground too, approach those topics, but approach them in a slightly less vulnerable and confronting way with your emotional language. And that often helps somebody, if you ask specific questions in that less intense way, that will help somebody to open up. And then if you're doing that while communicating about the different pillars you want to connect over, you're going to inevitably find more of that middle ground.
Yeah, I love that. I think you even shared once, isn't it true? You'll probably elicit more out of a more avoidant type person if you're using more thinking type language instead of feeling. So if the boss did something, instead of saying like, oh, how did that make you feel? To say something like, oh, what did you think when he did that? That's kind of going to be probably a little more of able to like flow out some dialogue and let them know sort of their thoughts on the issue. But if you ask them like, how did you feel in that situation? It might be like, oh, I don't know, like I didn't feel much. I wasn't paying attention to how I was feeling. Because generally in those situations, their mind is just cycling like crazy, and they're, going to fight or flight, and they're not really in their body and feeling, okay, when my boss is yelling at me, I can feel it in my chest or feel it in my stomach. Like it's more logical type stuff. So yeah, you coming at things in a more logical way, you'll probably get the person to share more. Obviously, we don't want someone just to share like strictly logical, like a computer spitting facts out at us. But if your partner, you just notice, doesn't really open up about much, then the language in more thought-based will probably get you more results.
So I have some really exciting news, and it's that integrated attachment theory training is back. So who is this for? Well, of course, this is for any individual who wants to make an impact and really be of service to others while also obtaining freedom and flexibility and abundance in their lives. And this is also for anybody who's already a counselor, a therapist, a coach, and just really wants to expand their toolkit. We've had so many people enter into the integrated attachment theory program because they're just looking to obtain a certain degree of mastery in terms of understanding their own attachment patterns and also the attachment patterns of maybe their children or partner or other loved ones in their lives, so they can really support those people and understand them more deeply. So if you're interested, click the link below to learn more and dive in with me, and I'd love to see you on the other side before seats run out. I want to just add one last thing to it, which is that like for every single one of these things that we're going through, if you're a dismissive avoidant, vet for these things, have these conversations, try to look around, like, is somebody How can I move from like, we should never talk about feelings into like something that's a healthy middle ground? And then are people respecting that healthy middle ground? Are they showing up for that when I communicate it? And likewise, obviously, if you're anxiously attached or fearful avoidant with that anxious side, and you are seeing somebody not be willing to talk about feelings, again, use these tools, practice these things, do it for a period of time and vet. Do they show up? Does the needle move? Is there the growth in the relationship I'm looking for? If the answer is yes, amazing. You're growing your relationship and you're going to keep being able to do that. If the answer is no, nothing changes, well, then maybe you want to reconsider that relationship dynamic if you're not feeling fulfilled.
100%. I just want to add to that. What was helpful for me was, okay, I didn't like if somebody would just put me on the spot and be like, okay, let's share feelings now. Like, how do you feel about the relationship? Or what are the things you love about me? Like, if you're just sort of bombarded by it, you're kind of like deer in headlights, and you're probably just going to be reaching for stuff just to like get them to leave you alone, kind of thing. In essence, I know it sounds terrible, but so what I found was really helpful is if somebody's really, that means a lot to them and they want to know some of those things, and rightfully so. Like, you want to know, like, hey, why are you with me? Like, what are some of the things you enjoy about it? So if they bring that topic up and say, you don't have to answer this minute, or you don't have to answer right now, but I'm just curious, like, it makes me really happy to know a few reasons of why you enjoy this relationship, or why you like me and why you love me. And you can let them know, like, you don't have to let me know right now, but maybe, next week when we're at dinner, like, you could think about it and just tell me a few things that really make you happy about us. And just the act of like, okay, cool, like, not having that pressure to like answer right there and feel like vulnerable and squeamish. You can go off on your own and just think about a few things. And then that when we go to dinner, she's going to ask that question. It's not a big shocker or a big surprise. And hopefully in the few days that you got to think about it, you can come up with 3 or 4 things.
I love that. And you know what I'm going to say to just back you on that too, is that people are like, oh, but then they're doing it for the sake of doing it. You know what? Dismissive avoidance, they won't do stuff they don't want to do. So by getting around their core wounds, by not putting them under pressure and putting them on the spot, but still making space for your needs, again, in a way that considers that other person, which is like part of why we talk about attachment styles in the first place. How can we like understand each other's rules and be mindful of them so we can still get our needs met, but in the framework of how it's not going to trigger somebody else in the process? Like, by doing something like that, that's such a great example. And you know what's going to happen? And I've seen things like this in so many different clients. You're going to get really sincere thought about things from a dismissive avoidant if they're willing to show up for the relationship. And if they're not, and if they're like, I'm never telling you things, or I'm not going to bring that up or ever make the effort, despite you communicating it, then you're getting clear on like how that person's going to be in the future. And so that's such a great example. And what I love about that is it honestly will really showcase if somebody's sincerely showing up to try and make an effort in the relationship when their wounds aren't being pressed on and their fears aren't being touched in the process.
Exactly. And then you'll see, like, just by coming up with like those 3, 4, 5 things, you'll see how freaking happy your partner is. Like, that's going to send them to the moon. And it was really just, you're just telling them like 4 or 5 things that you enjoy, like why you want to spend some time with them. You know what I mean? So again, it's like a good cycle, because I think the DA also sees like, wow, that's all I have to do is say like a few things. But as I'm saying that, I'm thinking this is a hack for the DA to just get your partner to like get off your back or leave you alone. But really, it's just not being ambushed is such a huge thing. And DAs are more thoughtful and need a bit more time usually to like.
And yeah, you might have a DA who's like, oh, let me just say these things to get them off my back. But like, but honestly, you're going to be able to tell the difference. And if that's where somebody is, they're not going to be making a concerted effort on a regular basis to meet your needs. Like, you're going to see that it's like, oh yeah, let me just go through the motions. You'll be able to tell that and feel that. And I really want to highlight that I've had so many clients over the years who were DA. And when they just have the opportunity, when they knew their partner needed something, but they weren't pressured and it wasn't pushing on their core wounds, they would show up and make compromises. If they're interested in the relationship, they will seriously show up and make an effort. If you're seeing somebody make no effort, then what you don't want to do is be like, oh, it's because they're DA, so let me just stick around. No, like, the person, irrespective of their attachment style, is just not making an effort. But if somebody's making an effort, but it's imperfect because we're coming from a different attachment style and different modeling, that's where like there's beautiful growth that's available. And you have to check in and make sure that you're vetting along the journey of seeing those things unfold.
Yeah, definitely. And last but not least, I just want to say, like, this is when this might be just a me thing, but it could be an extreme DA thing. If somebody wrote me an email or a letter and stated maybe something more vulnerable or something that they was really on their mind, or that they wanted to like talk about the relationship and where we're going and if they should stay or go, these types of things. Again, it's very non-threatening and non being put on the spot. You're giving them a chance to like sort of read and see your thoughts and feelings on paper, and then getting a chance to digest it and really thoughtfully think about how they're going to respond. And again, you're allowing them to respond with email or text message because they've taken a long time and you know, probably not as worked up as they would be on the spot. So again, thoughtfully write out the response and be able to deliver it back to you. Because they could be really scared to say it in person and think like, what if they say something that you don't like? It's going to be like a grenade and they're just going to blow up. So by this way, it's like you're sending them that, and then they're going to have a chance to sort of read it and see sort of some of your inner thoughts and inner workings. So I just want to share that one, because I know in the past when I was like just so closed off, like I would actually be able to open up a bit if it was on a letter or text, but in person it was almost not happening. So
yeah, I really like that. That's great feedback. Okay, let's do another expectation. We'll do another one.
Sure, for sure. Somebody who doesn't want to blend friends or families.
Okay, so let's talk about this one. So this is a great one, right? And I'm sure people who are dating dismissive avoidants have seen this. Like, I think there's a healthy middle ground here where it's like, okay, we've been dating for 2 months. Do we need to blend friends and family right now? And you know, sometimes that can be a strange and confusing thing for people who are like trying to push that too quickly, like on one side of the extreme. But the other side is if you've been dating somebody for like 2 years and you've never met their friends or family, I mean, geez, those could be red flags for other things. Those could be red flags for like, are they even single? Like, what's going on here?
The single family on the side.
Yeah, like, listen, I've seen things like that. It's something to be like, hey, if it's been 2 years, you've never met another person in their life, there can be reasons that happens for sure, but that should be red flagging for anybody. So, the healthy middle ground. So let's go back to this idea of like, hey, we can't actually find the healthy middle ground until we put our cards out on the table in the honesty of like what they are. And for a dismissive avoidant, that might be, okay, you know, we don't want to blend friends and family right away because I need to take my time to, you know that actually I'll put this over to you for a second. I would see a lot of dismissive avoidants avoid doing this because they were afraid that if the relationship didn't work out, they'd feel embarrassed and ashamed in front of their friends and family that they like brought someone in serious and then it didn't work. Or they'd feel like, oh my gosh, I have to manage everybody's like expectations around me and make sure that, you know, this person likes my partner and then that my family likes my partner and, you know, and it would be all this stress and that the partner likes the family. Or just a privacy thing or feeling like judged for having the family they had. Like what kinds of things would you see with dismissive avoidance in terms of, in your own experience, why didn't you want to blend friends and family at times?
Yeah, first the one you mentioned, you touched on it, like first of all, emotional sort of turbulence and high emotional situations are very like scary or whatever. So if you're blending friends and family and in-laws and all this kind of stuff, this is like a powder keg of like, you know, upsetting people and disappointing people and having to have vulnerable conversations with people. Like, you know, I know if people are married to someone and been with somebody's family for like 20 years or whatever, sometimes they'll have to talk to the parents or like cousins, uncles, like just say, hey, like, you know, I still care about you guys, but this is why it didn't work out. Like you still want to have that closure or communication. But anyway, if you get my point, it's like there's just so much kind of emotion and things are too tied in and it's scary. So you're like, oh, I don't want to like go through all that breakup if it actually gets to like such a deep point. So I'm going to avoid sort of that if it doesn't have to happen. And then number two, like an avoidant, I believe they think it sends out such a message of like, oh, we're getting married for sure. Like this is like, I'm committing to like lifelong together with you. Like, so there's an essence of, there's an element of feeling trapped. You're feeling like If I meet their parents, oh man, I'm like locked in. If I meet their whole social friend group and start to get to know them and like them, oh, I'm trapped for sure. So I think there's this fear of pushing that back as long as you can until you know, like 100% sure that this is someone you want to be with for like a long period. And for a day, that might take like a long time. So yeah, those are sort of a couple of things.
Those were so good. Those are, I totally see those. And you know, if it's so interesting, this is so wild when I started thinking about this, the opposite, you know what a lot of anxious attachment styles would say? They
Mm.
would say, if I'm gonna date this person, I need to know that my friends and family like them.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And it wouldn't even be like oh, because we're doing this, it means we're committed forever. It would actually be, in order to commit, I have to know that my friends and family would like them, like even in order to be in like a more serious relationship. And so
Yeah,
they would see like on the opposite end of that continuum, like anxious attachment styles really being in a space where they would be like, in order to even date this person or take them seriously, or fearful avoidance could even be like this sometimes. I need to know that they're going to get along with like the people in my life, that they're going to, you know, be liked by the people in my life because those people are so important to me. And so it's just so interesting how the different attachment styles
can I
have been.
interject on that? Now that you're talking about that, I remember being super anxious about meeting someone's friends because I'm thinking like already I feel like I'm not good enough and defective, and you know I've sort of tricked this person into not knowing how screwed up I am, and she's happy with me. What if I go and meet her friends and they're like, dude, like, what are you doing with that guy? That guy's weird, or that guy's a weirdo, or he's not very outgoing, or like whatever. So I'd be so afraid that I have to like put on this like performance and like win over these people. And it was just such anxiety because it's like, what if they don't like me? And then maybe my partner will leave. So I think I was delaying that as long as I could because I was like, I don't want to be in front of the judge and the jury. And what if they don't like me? Or that could spell disaster, right?
Wow. That's
Yeah.
such a powerful share, like such a vulnerable share, because I just think it's
Yeah.
so like we see things at face value, like the person avoiding meeting the friends and family, and instead of understanding there's this whole like inner rich world of reasons why this might be occurring, instead it's
Yeah.
like, oh, we're quick to personalize or assume the worst. Now, of course, like it doesn't mean if you're somebody on the other side of this, just like never meet the person's friends and family and never talk about it. But it's just so, I think like it's like we have to transparently explore the different relationship to these things first from either end. And I think the other parts are that you know, sometimes when a person's dating somebody, especially people who are more expressive to their friends and family, like fearful avoidance or anxious preoccupied, they're gonna also get some of that pressure from people in their life. Like, what about
Yeah.
this person you keep talking about? Are we gonna meet them? Or like, are we, hey, bring out your partner with like me and my husband or my
Yeah.
wife, or you know, and so there can be these like parts where when that feels like more normalized for somebody who's FA or AP, and then they're
Yeah.
getting pressure, and then it can feel like they're sort of putting the pressure on because they're like, wait, now that you're not doing it or avoiding it, now I'm like more suspicious, or now I really want to see what's going on. Are you? So you can see how it becomes this like vicious cycle. And
Yeah.
so I really think the middle ground for that is to have an honest conversation about what a reasonable time of pacing is on the topic.
Yeah.
Like, how long do we think it's appropriate to meet each other's friends and family or not? And once one person, like, if a dismissive avoidance, like, oh, I want to wait till like at least a year, and somebody else anxious or fearful avoidant is going, well, I would have thought like around 6 months. Okay, why don't we try for like 8 months or so? Why don't we try for somewhere in the middle? And hey, I'm curious. Why do you like to wait a long time? What stresses you out about it, or what feels challenging about it? Use that ambiguous language. You don't have to say what scares you so terribly about it, because then a DA is going to be like, I'm not scared, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But hey, what feels uncomfortable or challenging about that? What are your concerns? Even is a great question. And then from the flip
Yeah.
side, hey, here's my concerns about why I think it's important to do earlier on. And when we're having these transparent conversations to bridge the gap between you honestly laid your cards out on the table, the other person honestly laid their cards out on the table, now we can actually have the discussion. We can dig into it just a little bit about what our concerns or challenging parts of it are about doing it or not doing it earlier on or later on. Well, now all of a sudden we're inspired to have a productive conversation where it's like, okay, cool, we can meet in the middle. Now I'm not personalizing the other person wanting to take a little bit more time. Now you're not personalizing the other person pressuring you a little bit more. We can understand where it's coming from. And now we have this healthy middle ground of expectations.
Yeah, I love that. And just to add another thing is you can drip it slowly. Like don't I get we mentioned before, but like maybe it's like, hey, my friend's doing an art gallery opening here, and it's just going to be her there. Can we go by and just check out some art, and we can say hi? Kind of like low pressure, low stakes. Like you're not sitting at a table and there's 10 people, and they're all kind of going to be focused on you because it's one of their best friends, new boyfriends or partners. So yeah, just kind of like drip it slowly. Like, hey, can we see my friend's gallery? Or hey, my cousin is having whatever. I can't even think of something, but
An
just maybe
event
like
of some kind.
an
Yeah.
event or just something. Or hey, I know my cousin and her friends are going to be at a bar tonight. Like, you want to come check that out? So it doesn't have to be this like formal, like, okay, we're all going to gather at my parents' house. My brother's going to be there. My cousin's, like, that's a lot of pressure. And to add also pressure to that is like, avoidants are generally attracting more anxious types. So I always think like this family is going to be very warm and very open and very like, just like whatever. So then if I go to that, they're going to be like, this guy's a drip. Like he's not very warm. He seems very like emotionally closed off. Like, what are you doing with this guy? So there was also that sort of worry as well. So
It's so
um,
funny how much more like dismissive avoidance and like you're sharing so beautifully and vulnerably about this, which is obviously like such a signpost of your growth. But like, I just want for people listening to know, like, I spent a lot of time, like, I was in client practice for 10 plus years and working with people, and I saw so many dismissive avoidance. Like, this is not single to like Mike's experience at the time. Like, this is dismissive avoidance are so much more in your head than you realize. And they have so many like concerns like this, but they just won't show them or say them. And so that's like one of the major differences. And of course, it doesn't mean like they get like this, you know, free pass on any behaviors that are unhealthy, but it does mean like, hey, we can have compassion and understanding while still advocating for our needs.
right. And one last thing, just to add, like the time aspect. So it might be scary for them to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be around your family for like 6 hours. Maybe just start out like, hey, we're just going to pop in to have a few appetizers and then, say that we're going to, we have a show that we're going to tonight. So just stop in for like an hour. Like, doesn't have to be this 6 hour marathon of like you feeling like you're on display, like under a magnifying glass, things like that.
I used to say to people whenever they're trying to communicate like in relationships with like their spouse and people who come into counseling with me, I would say to them like, hey, if you have a dismissive avoidant and you're trying to like get a new behavior going in the relationship, just time box it. Like instead of saying like, hey, will you help me like tidy the garage on Sunday morning?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, all of Sunday morning, I'm getting up at 6 and I'm until 12 o'clock, I'm tidying the garage. Like
Yeah.
tell the person, because DAs will often magnify the things they fear in terms of time in their head. It's like such an interesting thing. And so if you're like, hey, I'm gonna do the garage for an hour Sunday morning, will you come in and help? Like that's where you're more likely to see momentum, because otherwise
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, dinner with the family, we're gonna be there for 9 hours. It's never gonna end. And like all the fears can come in there as well.
Yeah. The amount of sort of energetic give you'd have, like by the end of it, you'd probably be just like sucked dry, right? So
Yep.
there's that worry about the energy spent. So yeah,
100%.
the time aspect's really important. I'm glad you mentioned that.
So before you go into the next one,
I have 20 more. Come on.
we have so many. So what I'm going to do for the sake of time, because this is already like an hour and 10-minute episode. This is so good. Thank you for opening this like amazing can of worms. So I just want everybody to know, listening, that we actually started off the podcast today being like, oh, we're going to cover these 3 major types of questions that people have. And they started off with all these different things. And then Mike came in with like the best relationship expectations for dismissive avoidance. I was like, okay, we have to unpack all of these in more detail. So this is actually going to be part of a series over the next couple of weeks. And stay tuned. You'll hear the other one partway through this week. We're going to finish talking about these big relationship expectations dismissive avoidance tend to have. And we're going to talk about what are those like healthy middle grounds. And then we're going to go into this from the fearful avoidant perspective and do an episode on the anxious attachment perspective and where we can have something that's healthy in the middle and how to do that if you have a partner with a different attachment style. So thank you for making this episode so special and like super exciting, because I think this is an amazing topic for listeners. And thank you everybody who's tuning in and listening. You can find us on YouTube. If you are listening to us on your favorite podcast streaming platforms right now, you can check out the video version on YouTube. Or if you are on YouTube and you want company on your ride to work or home from work or while you're bored or just running errands, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, like wherever you listen to your podcasts. And We really, really appreciate you tuning in. I'm going to leave all of Mike DeZio's information down below if you want to get in touch with him on social media. And if you want to dive deeper into any thing that we're doing in terms of personal development school, courses we have, free trials we have, or exciting sort of times going on where you're able to join PDS for free for a limited time, I will also put links down below to that. Is there anything you want to add, Mike, before we wrap?
No, I just, I think this is the longest one that we did. So if you're with us all the way to the end, I'm really happy you're here, and I hope you got some good stuff out of it. So I had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed listening.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth, and thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.